Last episode of McBrides Moving Up, we talked about, it was entitled Restorative Justice. Although we didn't use that as it relates to criminal justice, I showed the kids where our vehicle was crashed into on the way to AAU Junior Olympics. And it took a long process. At least I thought the process was long to get my vehicle repaired. But my vehicle was eventually restored. We also showed the house, one of our rentals, how the tenant destroyed the property, broke some things, and they left the place dirty and windows broken. So we had to restore that to something that somebody could live in. So that's the way restorative justice works. The idea is that the state will force the victim, not the victim, the state will force the criminal, the perpetrator, to repay the victim or to restore them to where they were. If you steal my car, then you replace it with a car. Things like somebody steal $500, you pay $500 back. So that makes sense to y'all?
Yes.
You restore, or get as close to it as possible to restoring that victim to where they were. So what if you take somebody's life? Can that be restored?
No.
How can you repay the family of the person whose life you took? You can't repay them, can you?
No.
So we also have something that is called retribution, or retributive justice. Retribution means we punish you for what you did. And I know we say that, why punish people? And vengeance belongs to God. That's all true. But there is a penance that people may have to pay on this side of life. And this is not a spiritual or religious discussion. We're talking about retribution. So you say the death penalty. The state of Texas is quite handy with the carrying out the death penalty. Okay? Well, you might not like it, but let me tell you a story. And I don't know what side of this you fall on. You might be against retribution. But let me tell you a story. We all know I worked on death row, correct? I met a lot of people. And I don't like using the term met, but I did meet a lot of infamous killers. And there was one man on death row by the name of Hilton Crawford. Hilton Crawford. And let me tell you his story, or the story behind him coming to death row. And the reason that this stands out to me is because some of the people involved, I knew them. Before this. So Hilton Crawford was friends with the Everetts. And we'll call them Mr. and Mrs. Everett. And the reason I call them Mr. and Mrs. Everett is because Miss Everett had been a school teacher in New Waverly, Texas at some point in her life. She wasn't my teacher, but she taught my sister, I believe, in the 4th or 5th grade. My sister is 4 years older than me. But so I was aware of Miss Everett. So the Everetts became reasonably, if that's such a word, they became wealthy. They were involved in Amway. Amway is a company, y'all can look that up. They do a lot of sales and some people call it, sometimes you call it a pyramid scheme if you're not familiar with you, but I don't think that's really what they are. But y'all can check it out. Look up pyramid schemes in your studies and your searches. And they were friends with someone else that was involved in Amway, a man by the name of Hilton Crawford. Hilton Crawford was a retired Beaumont police officer, and they lived in Conroe, Texas. and they were friends. The Everetts had a son by the name of McKay Everett, and he was 12 years old when this story begins. 12 years old, and he knew Hilton Crawford as Uncle Hilty. So there was a day that the Everetts and Uncle Hilty, if you will, were supposed to go to a Amway meeting together. The day of the meeting, he called the Everetts to make sure that they were going. They were going to be there. They got to the meeting. He wasn't there. And they left their 12-year-old son, McKay Everett, at home. Well, he's 12 years old, and he could stay home by himself. And when they returned from the Amway meeting, they came home to discover that McKay was not at home, had been taken, and a ransom note was left, $500,000 for the return of your son. $500,000 for ransom. And the Everetts did what we all should do in this case. They called the police. And they did not know where McKay was. Later on, I don't know how Uncle Hilty became a suspect, but later on, I think somebody witnessed his car about 30 minutes after the Everetts left home. They saw his car leaving the area, speeding off. Well, his car was found in Beaumont, Texas. That's where he's from, or had worked at. And they found the blood in the trunk that matched McKay Everett. So Hilton was arrested. Okay? And later he confessed that the boy was in fact dead, but he didn't do it. And that some person named R.L. Remington had did it. Police determined that there was a figment of Hilton's imagination, or he just made it up. And he gave them a map to where the boy's body was, somewhere in Louisiana, and they found his body already decomposing. Hilton went on trial. The trial should have been or would have been in Montgomery County, that's in Conroe, but his attorneys got a change of venue. You guys can look that word up, change of venue. Basically that means we're going to move the trial to another county or district. What? Well, his attorneys felt like he couldn't get a fair trial, in the Conroe area, because the people had heard about the story and they would be biased against him, against Hilton Crawford. So it was tried in Walker County, Huntsville. And after the trial, the jury, it took them about an hour to deliberate. And y'all can look up deliberate. That basically means they go in the back room and they talk about it and come to a decision, right? They determined that he was guilty. And the judge sentenced him to die by lethal injection. And it's around about 95, 96, somewhere in there. And when he came to death row, I was working on death row. And I met him once. I remember he had to go down to the visitation because the news media was going to interview him. Yes, prisoners, especially the ones on death row, have access to the media, the news, and because they might want to secure a retrial. They give an opportunity to appeal that decision because they've been sentenced to die. And that's the last I saw of him. I didn't say nothing to him other than walk him down to that visit. But I knew who he was.
What he had for his final meal.
What was that?
He had 12 beef ribs, 3 enchiladas, chicken fried steak with creamy gravy, crisp bacon sandwich, ketchup, a loaf of bread, cobbler, 3 Cokes, 3 root beers, French fries, and onion rings.
Actually, the county for whom that sent him to prison, they're responsible for his meals up until that last meal. The state pays for that because his penalty has not been carried out while he's sitting there, for those years. So actually, he still belongs to the county. He's not the state inmate until they carry out his penalty, which is death. About 3 days before his death date, he becomes the state's inmate, if you will. And then you say, how does it work like that? Well, if somebody else, a regular person or a regular situation, I don't know if that's the right word, regular, gets sentenced to, like, say, 20 years in prison, right? When they go to the state prison system, the state is carrying out that penalty, right? 20 years, you're gonna be here. Well, if somebody gets the death penalty, he ain't dead yet. The state hadn't done his job yet. So he doesn't become the state's inmate, if you will, until 3 days before that date that he's due to receive that lethal injection. The Everetts also appeared on Oprah's show some years ago, talking about their experience, the things they had been through. This should wake people up to who they allow their kids to be around. That's what I tell y'all all the time. Every time a car start up to somebody other than us and you ask, can you go? And most of the time we say no. This is why. It ain't that we distrust people, but it's our responsibility to make sure that you're okay. About 8 years later, Hilton final appeal was not heard by the Supreme Court, and he was given a date that he would receive the lethal injection. And when he was strapped down on the gurney to receive the lethal injection, outside the window, Mrs. Everett was watching. They allowed the victim's parents, relatives, to watch the execution. And Hilton apologized to her, said that he was sorry and that he had come to know Jesus. He's sorry for what he did. Then the lethal injection was administered to him, and the state of Texas carried out its retribution as he gave up the ghost. That's Texas.